Greetings and welcome to our first tasting of the Hillcrest Club 44 series. This release, we actually have three beautiful wines. Two of them you're somewhat familiar with, and I've got new vintages, and then we have a brand new wine to release and share with you. So let's get right to it. Perennial favorite, La Pig. We've been making that for a number of years now. Barbera, that's specifically made to go with pork. Barbera is what the Northern Italians say they lubricate their daily bread with every day, and it is a world-class variety that has kind of an interesting mix of history in the New World. When I got in the business in the early 80s in Napa Valley, they were still drinking a lot of like 70, 74, 75 Barberas out of Napa and Sonoma, and those were actually the most expensive wines at the time. And you saw Barbera come out of northern Italy as the Italians immigrated to the New World, primarily to North America and then also to South America, where in Argentina it's a dominant variety, along with other varieties like Bonarda and that Sangiovese as well. But anyway, I like to do a style that is very traditional. A lot of new styles have a lot of wood on them and people add tannin. Barbera is very high bright acid, supple black fruit, very creamy, typically no tannin. And so this is the first vintage we've aged in the Boti, which are those large 5,000 liter, about 1,300 gallon cask. So I'm just getting ready to release this, and anyway, we'll take a little sniff here. Really kind of sweet, almost like cherry, chocolatey cherry kind of fruit, perfumey in the nose. And as always, that super creamy black fruit. Fresh, a little bit more acidity in 18 than I normally have, which is much more traditional. But this is, it tucks right underneath this really sweet kind of enveloping fruit. And super exciting vintage for it, and like I said, a little bit different because of the Boti that I think will actually make the wine better at the table. It's a little bit kind of brighter, more focused than it would be in small barrel, but it also has a beautiful future. The next wine we have is our international release, which is the 2016 vintage of our Poboleda, which is Carignan with a little bit of Grenache blended in. And Carignan at one time, actually until very recently, was a #1 variety planted in France. Originally a Spanish variety from the Kingdom of Aragon, which is the central western side of the Pyrenees, which also happens to be where Tempranillo and Grenache come from. But Carignan is a variety that can produce massive yields. It's used in California to this day, oftentimes as a bulk wine or generic wine base. It can produce massive clusters, the largest clusters I've seen in my life that look like the clusters you'll find in a cornucopia. But in very severe areas, which Poboleda is the epicenter of Priorat outside of Barcelona, just complete rock pile, super low yields, actually the lowest yields in the world at about 3/4 of a ton an acre in Catalonia, bottom third of the Pyrenees again. You get these vines with just tiny clusters, super concentration, super minerally. So we'll take a run at it here. You can see the color's quite a bit darker. These are 100-year-old vines. And I mentioned the California clusters might be like this in Priorat, Spain, like little pine cones. So known for minerality. We'll see if that's there. Yeah, there's a beautiful, almost kind of like dusted plum character to it in the nose. And kind of like a sweet graphite kind of minerally component that come from the slate soil. So everywhere in Europe that we make wines, slate soil is a major part of that, and here you rarely see that. Those of you that have recently had the Licheralia, that's the wine, the Merlot Syrah blend that we do, that comes from the black slate. This is slightly different slate, but very powerful nose. Very mouth-filling, very rich, but still very elegant. 16 is a super classic vintage of really nice, bright acid, beautiful round kind of fruit to it, but very long on the palate and a little bit grippy. In the back end, you see a little bit more phenolics than you normally would see, but super fine. So tannins, you get into some tannin that's almost like chunky peanut butter, kind of big and coarse. This tannin is almost like when you peel an orange and you get into that white layer, super fine and very elegant, much like Pinot Noir tannin in classic Pinot Noir. So super beautiful baby wine with a great future in it. Finally, our latest entry into kind of a very old school style wine. So I like to say the way you go from white to red and you go from sweet to dry, you also go from wines that are very powerful, typically higher alcohol, to wines that are very crisp. And the more wine I drink, and many of the people I've worked around for a long time, the more acidity, and you get this very kind of bright component. So I've got a wine that's reaching back to a very old style that I've tasted in Austria and northern Italy, and this is kind of focused on a northern Italian style. This is Pinot Blanc, brought in at about 19 bricks. So typically you would bring in whites 21, 22, 23, 24% sugar. Dry wine means that's translated into alcohol of 12.5, 14.5% alcohol. This wine is 11.5%, higher acidity, so but very, very crisp, bright. If you know quince, quince is this beautiful kind of sweet fruit out of Europe, but it has this like lemony, zesty citrus component that makes it very, very beautiful. It's used to drink for distillates. It's used for pies and tarts and that. Incredible. Susan says this reminds her of quince when she smells it, and you rarely hear that descriptor in American wines. You see it quite a bit in European whites. So this is actually fermented, 100% barrel fermented. The wood component is not there except for in the mouth. You really can't smell it in the nose, but it's to help take something that's very tight, almost like water going through a gorge, and then to kind of round that out a little bit and stretch it out. So I barrel fermented this, and then for 2.5 years left it on the yeast. And this is a way to help prevent the wine from over oxidizing. But as yeast breaks down, it gives you creaminess and yeastiness and complexity. And this wine is truly unlike, I think, anything produced in modern times in Umpqua Valley. The quince is bang, right off the nose. Some of you that have been to Europe and that might smell almost like a preserve or something like that, but super bright, focused. And as soon as I smell it, almost like in the back of my nose, almost releases this kind of, the same thing when you smell like lemonade, and that kind of, you kind of begin to salivate a little bit, but super beautiful, bright. Almost a little waxy. Sometimes you get like a little bit of like a, Gruner Veltliners will have this a little bit of almost like a squash character. It's a real rich, kind of heavy, beautiful, rich intensity. It dances on the palate, kind of a little of this Italian action, but has this beautiful volume that's so gentle, and there's no heat to it. A lot of wines that have this richness and intensity, you'll get a little bit of burn from the alcohol here. I'm still salivating. It's beautiful. The wine really opens up and stays open for a long time, and just right now it's beginning to kind of close down. But it's you know, I always say lemonade on a hot day, the first couple tastes are to quench your thirst, and then after that you can't keep your hand off your glass. Our Bianco is exactly that. So anyway, we hope you really enjoy the wines. We've got all kinds of wines available. You want to give us a call or check out the website and that. But these are the 3 releases we have for our first release of this wine season. So cheers into the genie in the bottle.